Okay, can everybody hear me? I don't even have to project. You will just hear me. So I'm Deidre Irwin with St. John's River Water Management District, and I was with you all about a year ago, maybe a little more. So some of my slides will be the same, but you're my test audience to try out new messaging to bring to homeowner associations. And because we're trying to push the envelope more and more, and that's why I invited Tonya, because we're really trying to join forces with UF to message more sustainable landscaping practices, including natives, to the masses, more or less. Just a minor task. So I think you've probably heard before, we're one of 5 water management districts in the state. We've got part of our issue with messaging water conservation is because the appearance that we're flush with water resources, with rivers and lakes and springs and the ocean. Why would we ever need to conserve water? And that can be challenging, especially with all our new residents who come from the West Coast. It's a story you have to tell almost. So this is the district's mission, which I chose this picture because it's becoming more and more of a balancing act to try and, our job is to ensure adequate water supply, no matter how Florida grows, essentially. Now, we do have regulatory programs that might shape how we grow, but a lot of people think we can control growth. We really can't. That's not the function of water management. We're just going to find the water magically somehow with our partners. And this is the program I work in. This is, which I think is really forward thinking when this was added to the Florida, when the legislature added this concept of planning ahead. We know many states out west haven't done this adequately, but we are legally mandated when we start seeing certain natural water bodies like springs, lakes, rivers become impaired, we're legislatively mandated to implement water supply plans, to look at the whole region, to look at where the water is going to come from, how it's going to grow for 20 years, and how are we going to protect those natural systems and still have adequate water supply for the growth that's coming. It's a very, very detailed and somewhat painful process. I'm in the midst of the 5-year update to the Central Florida Plan, and it's so much. I barely understand a lot of the modeling that's done. This is the region you're in. It's the North Florida Regional Water Supply Partnership. It includes Swanee River Water Management District, and anytime we have 2 districts, DEP is involved. DEP is our oversight agency, so they're very much at the table for this region. And you might wonder why this shape or why this, why is Swanee involved? Essentially, it's geology. So on the west coast of the region is where the highest concentration of springs are. The Ichituckney River, Santa Fe River, and all of those springs. And then in the southern area, in Putnam-Alachua line, we have what we call the Keystone Lakes. They are showing signs of impairment, as are the springs. So the impairment is coming from pumping, utility pumping on the East Coast is causing impact to these Western water structures per se. So that's why this has this shape, and that's why there are 2 districts involved. So as we move towards a time in North Florida where we no longer can rely on the aquifer as our primary, it is our primary source, but we're limited in how much more water we can take from that source. We have to look at alternatives. So right now the district is really busy meeting with all of our large water suppliers, JEA, Clay County, St. Johns County, Nassau, to try to figure out, well, where's the water going to come from if it's not coming from the aquifer? These are our primary sources, current water supply, and like everything else in the environment, it comes down to money. We'll never run out of seawater, but it's rather expensive to do reverse osmosis and have that be our primary source. So a lot of it comes down to the most affordable, sustainable options for the service area. And you can see we now have a price on water conservation. Last time I was here, we kind of didn't know, but JEA actually did a really comprehensive approach to the cost of implementing water conservation programs and how much water you can save. And a lot of lights went off in North Florida and suddenly JEA is pouring millions of dollars into conservation because it is the cheapest alternative source. I have notes somewhere for this one. So basically, a lot of what I said in the last slide is the same for this. So we're looking closely at all of the options. JEA is a really comprehensive program. They were with me last time I was here. They're looking at everything from residential indoor plumbing, big time residential outdoor. If you have an irrigation system, buy yourself a nice fancy smart controller and JEA will pay for it. I got mine for free, so. So their program is really effective. They have a commercial component for indoor commercial use. And the one I'm most excited about, because nobody else in the state is doing it, is HVAC, cooling towers. So cooling towers use a tremendous amount of water to cool our buildings. And they recycle it to a certain extent, but there are no state rules on how much you recycle that water. It accumulates a lot of hardness in the water, and you have to, what they call a blowdown, and that's into the storm drain. Actually, Mayo Clinic uses all of their blowdown water for irrigation. So that's one of the biggest recycling programs I've seen with HVAC. But JEA will basically pay you per 1,000 gallons saved to retrofit your HVAC system. They're having a hard time getting people to participate because there's never really been anything like this before, so people are still trying to get a handle on it. So we do work with agriculture, residential, big time with the irrigation industry, the irrigation designers, installers, and the maintenance companies, which is really challenging. The maintenance companies in Florida basically are the #1 controller of water use. So like the Brightview, United, all of those companies are the decision makers on how much we water a lot of times. So we're working hard to educate that population. We do a lot of outreach education as well as some direct programs to these audiences. This is a new slide I added today thanks to Doug, my colleague. Doug Conkey is our intergovernmental coordinator, and he got some new numbers. This is the program I think we should be most proud of at the district. Are you familiar with artesian wells in Florida, free-flowing wells? A lot of them were put in a long time ago. It's areas where the aquifer is compressed. And if you have a well, you don't need to pump, water just comes out. They're all over North Florida. So as people report it to us and tell us there's a free-flowing well and the owner is willing, we will plug the well for free. And since 2021, we've plugged 365, saving 45 million gallons per day of water, and the cost was 9 million. All of our other programs for the past 10 years, I didn't include this slide, but I just ran the numbers. We've saved about the same amount of water, but it cost us about 45 million. So this is our most cost-effective way to save water. And to me, it's the absolute first step. You deal with leaks or waste first, and then you deal with other things. So this is one that we're very proud of. So we focus primarily on outdoor, especially when we're dealing with residential. We have all sorts of new data from UF because UF has a tool that has data for about 1/3 of the state, the water supply utility data. So they know by customer how much water is being used, and they're able to tell utilities where and how to focus their programs. And also they can track water use after something happens. So say we work with this homeowner to put in a better irrigation system, add a smart controller. H2O Save, the tool, will track their water use for a year or 2 years afterwards. And we know when we need to visit again or remind them to reduce their water use. So as you can see from this, we've got our work cut out for us. 50% of residential use is outdoors if you have an in-ground irrigation system. How many of you have in-ground irrigation systems? So 3. I do also. I live in an HOA and you're required to keep your grass looking green. So this is our challenge. Did I include, I didn't include it. I have an excellent slide that comes from Alachua County, and it is a bar graph showing the increase in automatic irrigation systems, how in the 90s they started being put in, and by now they're in 100% of homes, and it's got a line for the water use, and it just went phew, straight up when we started using automatic irrigation. So we are not the expert in plants or horticulture or landscaping, but we encourage doing anything it takes to just water less and use less water, whether that be natives, whether it be preserving natural areas, not artificial turf, not rock. That's not part of what we're encouraging. Outdoor living areas with mulch, that's fine. But we do like plants, and there's a lot of environmental benefits and services for having real live vegetation. And I don't know if you guys realize, we haven't had too much of an issue yet, but the legislature passed a law last year that says that HOAs cannot disallow artificial turf in backyards because they were getting a lot of pressure, and most HOAs say no. Florida Friendly Landscaping says no. There are some places it's appropriate, maybe on a public playground or maybe on a sports field, but not in every residential yard. So some of the things we try to encourage are similar to Florida Friendly: site appropriate plants, right plant, right place. Reduce irrigated turf grass. Now, I have mixed feelings about this because you can have really nice turf grass blended with our native self-recruiting species or weeds and no irrigation. So if you really like to have a big meadow in your front yard, you shouldn't be forced not to have one, but just don't water it. See what recruits naturally. Preservation of existing, very hard to do in new subdivisions. You've seen how they develop subdivisions. They clear everything. They dig the ponds, they put in the stormwater infrastructure, build the houses, and there's maybe 2 trees left. So we work hard with infill lots with builders to not destroy everything. We work with the big ones too, but they don't really. It's cheaper to just knock everything down and buy more plants. Increased areas of shade. Shade reduces evapotranspiration from turf grass, but it's a fine balance because over time you can have too much shade, and then the HOA keeps making you replace the turf grass because you have too much shade, but you're not allowed to cut down the trees. So that one can be a bit tricky. Pollinator friendly. This is kind of like when butterfly gardening became popular. This is the gateway drug to sustainable landscaping. People love pollinator species. They're so important. So anything you can do with your landscape to create and maintain habitat for pollinators is a good thing. And you don't have to water it. That's a big part of our message. So again, including native species. I'm really excited over all the years of working with native landscape folks in the state. I see tremendous organization lately in the producers who are starting to produce at scale for the builder market. And builders are seeing the benefit of advertising that they use native species. It's taken about 20 years, but it's finally kind of coming to fruition. One of the nurseries I work with is Cherry Lake Tree Farm, and they are working with developing blended ground covers in lieu of turf grass. So frog fruit and mimosa and different things, how to commercially grow and harvest and install that, because nobody really had done it at scale. So there's a lot of interesting things happening. So this is kind of my passion. It's not a true water management district message, but why not? You know, I'm in drop. They're not going to fire me. But I am really passionate about the idea that you don't have to rip out all the turf grass that you have. You just allow native species to recruit in it and learn what they are. And Florida Friendly is now embracing this too. I know there are some slide decks of species to educate homeowners that you don't have to spray everything in your yard. These are really good species to have. So I'm trying to message this and get a bit of enthusiasm around the idea. So, you know, educating newcomers in particular that to have that green yard, if you choose to add a lot of fertilizer and pesticide, results in green natural water bodies and overuse of water. So, you know, the whole story of educating them. And then step 2 is that's okay if you have your lawn. You don't have to overwater it, and see what comes in naturally, our native Florida lawn species. And this is some of the blended grass or ground cover they're developing at Cherry Lake Tree Farm. And they're partnering with some builders down that way too, where they grow it, install it, and maintain it. Because there's a whole process. They don't want to grow it, install it, and walk away. And the maintenance company then has no idea how to take care of this. So they're doing what they call their chain of custody, to try and make sure that this is done right and doesn't become something that's put aside. Well, that didn't work. We won't try that again. So I'm very impressed with the work they're doing. So again, encouraging the native species, the pollinators. This is something we can sell versus talking about consumptive use permits, the aquifer, and alternative water sources. This is more the reason you might want to landscape a little differently. The other message I'm testing, and I've been asked to by Lennar Homes, they're having an issue in North Florida with some of their newer subdivisions in St. Johns County. We're working in particular with newcomers to Florida coming in and watering dormant grass like crazy, trying to make it green. So we're calling it Florida Gold. And I have notes. Oh, I found this really nice saying from Wilcox Nursery. And basically, as winter gently sweeps into the Sunshine State, you might assume that Florida's vibrant landscapes would lose their luster. However, nature has a surprise in store. Many of Florida native plants gracefully enter a state of winter dormancy, revealing a different kind of beauty just as captivating. Wouldn't that sell it to you? You know, it's so nicely written. So it goes on a little bit. So this is the development we were working with. It's also dormant, and it doesn't matter how much you water it in December, it's not going to turn green. So trying to get people to understand this is normal. And if you look around at natural systems, they also go dormant. Oops, I went a bit too far. So my big pitch with turf grass is we've butted heads, meaning the Water Star program that I work with the Florida Turf Growers Association, because they have worked very hard for 20 years to develop turf grass that can sustain with very little water and much fewer chemicals. But the behavior has not followed. Instead, everyone thinks we need to just remove all the turf grass and everything will be okay. People will still overwater whatever is there. So there's a lot more to it. So this is part of the messaging with HOAs that we use. That's my new controller, my Ratio, which I control from my phone, and actually got hit by lightning and fried, and they replaced it for free. So it's really nice. It does predictive monitoring. So you can see there on September 8th was meant to be a watering day, but it was going to rain, so it skipped automatically. Even if the next day is going to have heavy rain, it will sometimes skip. It does predictive stuff, which is pretty cool. And it's set to the irrigation restrictions so 2 days a week or 1 day a week. So it's really just a fancy rain sensor that works. And that is all I have. And I would like to introduce My Florida friendly, oops, I guess I should have this. Okay, thank you. So any questions about water management, North Florida? Thanks. Oh, and I brought along bringing reduced cost of free. These are new. They are scrapers, but you don't have to rinse water as much. And I'm sorry, everything is plastic. That's the way it is. And then for three lucky people who do our living around irrigation system, these are hose timers. So if you do use the hose while you're done, you can set a timer and not get up. So you can fight over those. And then if anyone is in teaching or has access to children that want water related stickers.
Thank you.
Yes.
My lawn gets irrigated by a shallow well.
Okay. Not unusual in North Florida.
Right. So what's the impact, I guess, on the environment of people using shallow wells?
It depends on where you are in the region. A lot of areas don't have that shallow groundwater aquifer. So it can protect.
Step a little closer so the Zoom people can hear.
Is it closer to here?
I don't know to them.
Oh, okay. I need to sound like here.
Yeah, because the microphone is just for Zoom.
Okay.
In certain areas. Like those.
And like in my old house in Maryland, I didn't put in like the sprinkler system.
Yeah.
I didn't see putting all that potable water on.
Yeah. It's infinitely better than potable water, and it's better than aquifer water. So.
Seems like with the amount of rain we get, it gets pretty
But yeah.
Can I pass these out?
Any questions, please repeat on for Zoom so they.
Oh,
We have to look before the HOA. Where we're making a lot of inroads is in Central Florida. Oh, in Central Florida, we are now in a situation where the growth is so rapid in Lake County in particular. The utilities don't have outdoor water to give them. They're only giving these new developments, 1,000 home communities, indoor water, and then they're coming to us for a permit. So we're putting restrictions on the percentage of turf grass. A lot of times it's unirrigated bahia in the backyard, and in the front yard, 50% turf grass. And these are not big lots. So that's where we're getting traction, and we're requiring covenants and restrictions. Maintain that design. You cannot change it. You cannot add irrigation, essentially. Yes. Yep, that's good. That is surface water. So she's taking water for irrigation from a natural lake that she's on. We really like to use, if you have a water body nearby, to use that certainly before potable water. But the other thing we're pushing developers to do is to make the stormwater ponds larger, which is a struggle because that means fewer houses, but use the stormwater ponds for irrigation. So all surface water is a really good option.
oh, yeah, I understand. Thanks, y'all. I just gave y'all something for the end because I didn't want to forget, but my name's Tonya Ashworth, and like was already said, I'm your Duval County Environmental Horticulture Extension Agent. So I help homeowners with gardening questions, vegetable questions, whatever kind of questions you have. And I oversee the Master Gardener Volunteer Program. We've got a couple hundred volunteers, and they do a fantastic job, and they're there to answer your questions too, on phones and emails. Tonight I'm going to talk to you about No Mow March, freedom lawns, and some pollinators. And at the end of my program, because I work for UF, every time I give a talk, I have to pass out paperwork, sorry. So one is a demographic form, and that's because we're partially funded by the USDA. And the other one is an evaluation of the program, because at the end of the year, I have to do a big report that says whether or not I taught classes and did people learn things. So at the end, if you don't mind just leaving them, I don't know, at the table or in your chair or somewhere, I'll find them. So we'll get right to it. Deidre is preaching to the choir with me. It's so important that we save money, save water, because saving water also saves money for you. But not only that, all the things that she was saying about keeping the excessive fertilizers out of our waterways, and keeping the algae from growing, and smothering up the sea grasses and keeping the manatees alive, it's also interconnected. So, and like she said, that sometimes that can be a hard sell if you start throwing out numbers of million gallons per day of the aquifer. But if you start talking to people about here's how you can save money, here's how you can save time, sometimes that can help. And plus, people really like the pollinators. I mean, if I go to a library and teach a class on weeds, I might get 3 people. If we talk about butterflies, the room's full. So there you go. So this No Mow March concept, it started out as No Mow May in Appleton, Wisconsin. The first year they did that was in 2020. And for that month, they got their city to suspend the weed ordinances. And it was a big hit. They had several hundred people participate. So the point of No Mow May, when they did it, was to provide forage, pollen, and nectar resources for native bees that were just starting to emerge. So here, No Mow May became No Mow March because spring, comes earlier for us. And so the native bees come out and they're looking for some food. And so it provides a way for them to have some resources out there. And it's the Bee City USA program, which is a program for the Xerces Society. The Xerces Society is a fabulous organization that focuses on invertebrates, so butterflies, bees, all the creatures. And they have lots of great resources on their website. If you've ever looked around on their website, if you haven't, I would recommend it. There's even like a native plant chart for Florida with which native plants encourage which insects and things like that. They have really great resources. So the thing is like if you let your yard kind of go and you have picky neighbors, they might talk about you a little bit. So if you go to their website, or if you live in an HOA, they might send you a letter. But if you go to their website, Bee City USA, they have these low mow spring signs that you can put. They have low mow May, or no mow May, but we don't do that. We do March. So you can do the low mow spring and put it in your yard, and people will understand what you're trying to do. And I think in Jacksonville, it's like 15 inches or less will keep you out of trouble with the code enforcement people. 15 inches or less, code enforcement, yeah.
I did this last year, No Mow March, which became No Mow April, because the grass was, I don't water it, so it didn't grow.
Right.
Day before I actually moved.
Yeah, well, one thing to know about that is freedom lawns will help with this. So a freedom lawn is where you basically just let whatever is growing out there grow. That's what I have in my backyard. I don't have any managed turf grass, I'm happy to say. My front yard is all planted up with a mixture of natives and just Florida-friendly things. And the backyard is a mixture of plantings, and it's all whatever's growing is growing, and I just keep it mowed. So we try to delay as long as we can in the spring and let some things start to bloom out there, some forbs that just kind of pop up. So freedom lawns are free from a lot of things: herbicides, insecticides, irrigation, fertilizers, and fungicides. And if you can see there on the left, that lawn is a freedom lawn. And on the right, it is pretty much St. Augustine. And if you get right up to it, you can tell. But if you're just driving down the road, a lot of times you can't really even tell. There's not a lot of difference between those 2 yards. So, yeah, it works for us at our house. What are some of the things you're free to do? Well, all that time that you might spend out there, you know, putting out your fertilizer and all this kind of stuff, just go to the beach and enjoy. You know, you have more time on the weekends if you spend less time managing. Money, I mean, if you hire a lawn service, that's big bucks and you don't really know exactly what they're putting out and why. And sometimes they put out fertilizer right before it rains, and you know, sometimes they don't spot treat so much. They just widespread. So you save money, you have peace of mind knowing what's going on your grass, or nothing's going to go on your grass. And then what about your pets? People sometimes call my office and they worry about their pets and their children and their grandchildren. Like, the lawn service sprayed something and I don't know what it is, and I'm worried about my animals or my grandkids or kids. So Freedom Lawns give you lots of freedom. Okay, research shows that mowing helps. So there's a couple of studies I want to mention. The first one was suburban yards in Massachusetts, and they looked at how frequently the lawns were mowed, whether it was every week, every other week, every third week. And if you only mowed every 3 weeks and you didn't have like a perfect stand of turf grass, the number of little flowers out there doubled. And so they had all of these bees. They documented 93 different species of bees were documented in these backyards. Because they had something to forage for. All right, here's another one. This is a meta-analysis. So they looked at a whole bunch of different studies and they're like, okay, what does all of the research say? And it said that less frequently mowed yards had increases in species diversity and quantity. And there was a decrease in the insects that we might consider pests. And the well-manicured lawns didn't have all the good pollinators, but they did have more of the things that they didn't want. So the more manicured and the more monoculture anything, the more pests that you have. All right, so you're not totally free in a Freedom Lawn. There is one thing you need to watch out for, and that's invasive species, because your lawn is probably a disturbed site. So when you just let it go, you want to make sure that you're not allowing just any and everything back there to take over. You want to save the room for the native forbs and grasses. So I asked Mark Frank, who's our botanist in Gainesville, I was like, can you tell me what are some of the invasive species that people report to you in their lawns? And so he gave me a few to look into. Torpedo grass is a terrible one. As a lot of these things were, the USDA thought it'd make good forage. So we have kind of shot ourselves in the foot a bunch of times. And now it can be found in 70% of Florida's public waters and is spread by lawn equipment. And it is mega hard to get rid of once you have it. So pull immediately. All right, here's another one, tropical spiderwort. So we do have spiderworts that are native, but this one's not. It's got the white flowers. And it was introduced as an ornamental, unfortunately, and can smother out our native ground covers. So if you see this one out there, pull it up. Skunk vine is not a great one either. It's category 1 invasive and on the Florida noxious weed list, so it's heavily regulated. And its little stem fragments can be transported and it roots at nodes. And they thought it might be a potential fiber crop. So there's another time we introduced something that didn't work out for us. Wedelia, this is one that he said he saw a lot, and it was brought in as an ornamental. And so now I think it's most likely if somebody who might have been at your house before you had planted it or something, you might have it that way. But yeah, it's not prohibited. Yeah. So, but it could, even though you didn't plant it, if you just let your yard go, it might show up. So if you see it, it's out of there. Okay, and this one, they thought maybe cattle forage, and hey, it's a legume. It'll fix nitrogen. It'll solve problems, you know? So, you know, add nitrogen to the soil, and then we feed it to the cattle. Unfortunately, it's on the IFAS assessment as caution. So, you know, IFAS has our own list of things that we consider. There's different categories: invasive, no uses, invasive, highly likely to become invasive, caution. There's a whole slew of them, and so this one is a caution. And it can get 6 feet long, and the little seed pods, when an animal or a person bumps into them, shatter, and they send seeds everywhere. So creeping indigo, but it's a possibility that it might be out there. And then this last one is a high invasion risk. It's just plain old common chickweed. So you probably would have this one if you let things go. So freedom lawns are great, but they're not always free from invasive species, and you have to always watch out for those. And this is by no means an exhaustive list. This is just the few that he said for sure he saw as a problem, and a couple that I knew would be a problem too. All right, bee stats and plants, because really low mow spring and no mow March is really at the heart of it, was supposed to be about the bees, although there's lots of other benefits. Here's some Florida bee stats. So in the eastern United States, we have about 770 native bee species. And so bees can be generalists or specialists. So a generalist bee will forage from a wide variety of plants. But a specialist bee has to have a particular native plant that it forages from. It's kind of like, butterflies have very specific host plants. Some bees have specific plants that they forage from. So 8 of those specialist bees can only be found in Florida. And then Florida itself has over 300 species of bees, which is a lot. And 86 of those species, or 28%, are specialist bees. And 28% is a pretty high number. So we have a good many specialist bees. And 29 of our bees are endemic. That means the only place you can find them is in Florida. We have a lot of endemic plant species. Florida is a very special place in all sorts of ways. But I mean, the native plants that we have, the diversity, and how many endemic species we have, how many threatened species we have, not of only bees, but plants too. So what generalist bees like? So I didn't put together slides on all these specialist bees because I probably really need a PhD in entomology to do that justice. But what generalist bees like? They like flowers that are flat shaped, like for instance, starts with an S, Stokes asters, all kinds of asters, coreopsis, all those good things. They love those kind of flower inflorescences because it's a nice place to land, and they have a short proboscis instead of a long one like a butterfly. And then they can't see red. So if you want to plant red things, that's good for hummingbirds, but bees and it. And then they like lots of flowers. So UF has done studies on, do native bees prefer native plants? Not necessarily. Don't throw things. So not necessarily, because most of them are generalists. What they love is lots and lots and lots of flowers blooming at once. So profusion. I think there was one study at UF that they were looking at, natives versus nativars. That term where like you have a native plant, but maybe it's been bred for certain color or whatever, certain traits. And so it has a cultivar name, but it came from a native species. And they wanted to see, do the bees prefer one over the other? And most of the time, it's whichever plant has the most flowers on it at the same time. They like lots of flowers. They like clusters of flowers because it takes a lot of energy to fly from flower to flower. So that's what they like. All right, here are some things that are not depressing if they pop up in your yard that you shouldn't pull. You probably all know Phyla notiflora by its many, many common names. Turkey tangle, fog, fruit, frog, fruit, every pin cushion, flower, batch, stick plant. I've heard a bunch of things. So Phyla notiflora, and it blooms year-round, full sun to part shade. And a lot of these slides are just going to say good source of nectar for pollinators, because I wanted to see if I could pin down for y'all like exactly which bees visit which things. But because most of our bees are generalists, that is super duper hard information to come by. So yeah, I think you would probably have to look up each individual native bee species and try to find some kind of research paper to see if somebody studied what they prefer. But because most of them are generalists, Here we go. So here's some plants that will be good for the bees when it pops up in your yard. And this one also is a host plant for the, I don't know how to say this right, I'm country. Thayon, thank you, crescent. White peacock, hair streaks, and common buckeyes. So I just love a butterfly host plant, don't y'all? I grow plants just for the larva. Okay. The next one, yellow wood sorrel, which is the native oxalis. The purple oxalis is my nemesis at my yard and my flower beds, but this yellow one is nice. It's native, good source of nectar and pollen, reseeds readily. So
So the purple is what level of invasiveness is that?
it's not technically invasive on the list. It just wants to take over my flower beds.
Oh, yeah,
So it's not native, but it's not like on anybody's list. Yeah. It's annoying. It's a nuisance. Yeah.
Which one?
The purple oxalis that's,
just like this one.
but purple. Mm-hmm. It's,
not native.
yeah. Yeah. It hasn't displaced any native species as far as I know. So it's just an annoyance. Yes. Exactly. Okay, here's one that I see a lot, dichondra, and who even knew it bloomed, but it does. The blooms are inconspicuous, but blooms early in the season. So this one will be good for those bees that are coming out of their winter naps and emerging. And larvae from the hawk moth. Mhm. Are there any what? Lookalikes? Okay, so one that some people might get confused is dollar weed. Okay, I don't know about that plant, but okay,
The one that smells
okay.
me, that looks a little like.
Okay, so for the people on Zoom, the question was, are there any lookalikes for this plant? And Deidre is saying Bacopa moneri. Okay,
Beautiful wetland species, and I have it in my yard by the pond, we walk on it, and we just film it.
that's nice.
And it's native.
Oh, good, even better. Lyre leaf sage, I love that one. Wouldn't that be awesome if you let some of that St. Augustine grass go and you ended up with lyre leaf sage? Nectar for hummingbirds, butterflies, bees, full sun to, that's supposed to be part shade. Not tolerant of foot traffic though, so if you do have a lawn and you're letting some of it go natural, then you have to think about how much foot traffic you might have. Cut leaf evening primrose, spread by seed, very drought tolerant, and can tolerate infrequent mowing. And lots of native bees, moths, butterflies, and birds eat the seeds, so even better. Host plant for some wasps, aphids, ladybugs, and plant bugs. So I'm thinking the aphids are banker plants for the ladybugs to come and eat. So it's providing food for a lot of different things, bees, wasps, ladybugs. I think so, yeah. I love this one. I get this one in my backyard. Florida betony, and it's an edible. How fun. I love to snack on things out in the yard. Oh, cool. Yeah, I love Florida betony. So this is one that, you know, it's like preaching to the choir coming here and telling y'all this stuff. But the average HOA dweller, excluding you, Deidre, they want to know what to spray to kill everything in sight. And you try to educate a little bit. Why don't you leave this little area, and let some of this stuff grow. Try to explain that just because, the only definition that, there's a few definitions for weed. One is a plant growing where you don't want it to grow. That's like my oxalis. One is a plant whose benefit has not been discovered yet. So this has some benefits. Geranium, Carolina cranespill, and bloom spring and summer, and then the little seed heads on there, doves can eat the seeds. How great is that? So early nectar for the bees. And then here's your common spiderwort, Tradescanthia ohiensis. and 2 to 3 feet tall, especially valuable to the bumblebees and the early flying bees. So I know as a kid, my mom would, I don't know, anyway, she would like stop on the side of the road and dig these up and then plant them in her yard back in Mississippi.
I actually kind of took some of my neighbor's yard, she's having some health issues, can't take care of her gardens. I love this plant, so I got it on transplanted.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, it can transplant. And if, when you're reading some of this stuff, it's like, you're not gonna find some of this to buy at a nursery. So then it's like, borrow some from your, see if your neighbors have some in their yard and you can take a sample from or something like that, or dig some up judiciously, of course. Okay, back to reducing turf grass. Ways to reduce turf for more bee food. Not only for more bee food, but for less water use, which is just as important. We got to drink too. Ground covers. So maybe we can start convincing people to use some ground covers. Here's one that maybe you might not know about or maybe not super familiar with, partridge berry. Michella repens, it stays very short, like 2 inches or so. And you can buy this at some native plant nurseries. And it can take shade, which is pretty cool because we have the problem of what do we grow under the trees, right? And then the creeping sage is so pretty, Salvia micella. And we actually are going to have some of that at our plant sale coming up. So our Master Gardener plant sale is March the 30th. It's the day before Easter. It's at the extension office. And I've ordered like 65 different kinds of native plants to sell, because I know it's hard to find native plants in Jacksonville to buy. And so we try to fill in that gap. We're not going to have all natives, but most of what I order is native. And then our Master Gardener volunteers, they grow things from their yard. Some's native, some's not. I don't buy all natives, but we have a big selection of natives. And so creeping sage is one of them. And also the sunshine mimosa, which I adore. I think that's such a cool little plant. And the creeping sage, I think, can also take shade. So there's a couple for shade. And the sunshine mimosa can take a little bit if you need something for under the trees. All right, expanded planting beds. Maybe you want to have really go all out with a Florida-friendly yard and do something like that up there where you get rid of the turf and you live under trees and tropical foliage of native plants. I think that's so pretty. It looks like, you know, your house is just nestled right in there in the native natural landscape. So pretty. Plant a pollinator garden. That's the easiest sell of all of this to the average homeowner, or make a rain garden. So ways to reduce turf grass. And I will say that if you live somewhere where you have to have some sort of turf grass and you have to choose a turf grass, you know, there are a few that do well here, and you're worried about bees. I read a study that shows that Bahia grass, they actually have found bees foraging on the little tiny seed heads of Bahia grass. So it's better than nothing, because St. Augustine grass has very little benefit to any kind of a pollinator. So at least there's that.
You know the barren structures. I have seen in my neighbor's yard who are very healthy, St. Augustine. They water and fertilize it all the time, and the flower and a butterfly I've never seen on it.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
I keep needing to look up
What?
butterflies.
Yeah. Because it's St. Augustine doesn't have such great benefits for pollinators, but that's pretty cool.
You don't often see the flowers.
That's right. It rarely ever flowers. Yeah. Bahia. They've actually seen bees foraging, so that's a pretty good thing to know. And also Bahia grass uses less water than like St. Augustine grass does. So if I had to put grass in my yard, I personally would do the Bahia. All right, we have a really good resource. It's called Florida Bee Gardens. It's a bee garden app. The Florida Friendly Landscaping website, you go there, and I think under resources, there's a few apps that we have. We have one for butterfly gardens, one for bee gardens, and like a plant guide for selecting plants for your yard. Native and non-native have to be Florida friendly, which means low fertilizer needs, low water needs, non-invasive. So yeah, we have this bee guide app, and you can search browse all bees, browse all plants. You can click on the only thing is it's not this little stuff like I'm talking about, the little forbs. This is like landscape plants and which ones are good for your bees. So that's a really good resource to check out. And it's kind of fun to get lost for a few minutes clicking on all the bee pictures. All right, that is all I've got. So, go ahead, Dinah.
Are they all native? Or what percent do you require that they be native?
Oh, like if you wanted to get your lawn certified Florida friendly? Okay, so we have a Florida friendly certification thing that you can do with your lawn. So our trained volunteers come out and they have a checklist and they look around in your yard. The Florida friendly, we have 9 principles like reducing water use and using pesticides appropriately and mulching and blah, blah, blah. So we got a brand new checklist that's just now being used, started like last week. And as of now, to qualify, you have to have at least 25% native species in your yard.
And there's a new certification coming for a natural, more natural yard. I can't remember the name.
Oh, cool.
But they're working on a whole new certification for more.
Yeah, previously we didn't have a standard like you had to have so many native plants. You just couldn't have invasive plants. But now at least 25% of the plant species have to be native, which I think is a positive step. So, and hopefully with more demand, we'll have easier access eventually to native plants for sale around here. Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
So much of the square footage is freedom lawn, and then there's much that counted the number of plants, species, there's a lot of natives, but if you did it by square foot, it's more grass. So
They're doing it by species.
What was the question?
Oh, the question was like the 25% native species in your yard, she's got a freedom lawn and then she's got plants in bed. So, and that was my question too, when they came out with the new thing, I was like, well, my backyard is freedom lawn. It's all, but they're looking at, in the beds, what you have species wise. They're not going to get out there and go, okay, there's some Bethany and there's some Bidens. And so, yeah, that's a good question. All right. Well, thank y'all. Thanks for having me. Yeah.
okay, guys. So whoever wants some of the free stuff, down to me. There's rain gauges up there.